The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Big Ben Haslar presiding. Will you all rise for the Honorable Judge Haslar? Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we are hearing the case of The People versus 1978's The Big Sleep, another adaptation of Raymond Chandler's detective novel of the same name. The Big Sleep follows private investigator Philip Marlowe as he unravels the case of blackmail turned murder concerning two affluent sisters. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt that the film is guilty. Mr. Dylan J. Schlender, you are appearing on behalf of the prosecution. You may begin your opening statement, sir.
I thank the judge for the kind introduction. It was just a normal day in my law office, getting good movies a fair shake and kicking the teeth in of bad guys. That's when this fancy little number strutted into the office, wearing tight pants that would leave nothing to even Dr. Seuss's imagination. My would-be informer made their introduction. I could tell this would be a hell of a case. The name is Ryan Roscoe Luis Rodriguez, he said, while dancing a candy cigarette between his fingers. Word on the street is a Brit is coming across the pond to defend The Big Sleep 1978. I tried to pump him for some more info, but that's all he had. That and one other name, a dock worker named Maynard Bangs. I Ubered to the docks and saw this bloke right out the gate. He was the gate man after all. Wild hair and wild eyes, I knew he could be trouble. Turns out he was surprisingly helpful. Matthew J. Elliott was the Brit, and he came stateside looking for a lawyer to take down me, Lil Dilly himself. Well, to do that, he will have to get over The Big Sleep's remake's numerous shortcomings, including, but not limited to, bad aesthetic choices, choppy editing, sleepy acting resulting largely from poor casting, and ill-timed monologues. But hey, maybe I shouldn't be so rough.
All right. Well, thank you for thinking out loud, Mr. Dylan J. Schlender. Appearing on behalf of the defense in this battle of the middle initials, it's Matthew J. Elliott. Please present your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, I'm just a simple country lunatic, but I have flown here all the way from England on a very uncomfortable flight and spent 5 days in quarantine at my own expense in order to discuss a film so obscure that most people are unaware that it exists, and the critics who do know it simply dismiss it as unworthy of their consideration. An adaptation of a classic 1930s private eye novel relocated to 1970s England, and in the role of the 33-year-old protagonist, a 60-year-old alcoholic who in one scene sports a noticeable bruise around his right eye, the result of having the shit beaten out of him by co-star Sarah Miles' abusive boyfriend as he returned to his hotel room one night after buying a bag of weed. True story. A film directed by Michael Winner, a man so thoroughly reviled that Marina Sirtis said of him, "I hope he rots in hell for all eternity." Luckily, she was one of the last mourners in line. In all other respects, it was a lovely service. Michael Winner, a man so hated that when he finally changed careers from director to food critic for his newspaper column, Winner's Dinners, I kid you not, the phrase winner's sauce soon thereafter entered the British lexicon. The term refers to the act of a chef masturbating into a meal he is preparing for a director turned food critic who's going to give the restaurant a bad write-up anyway. And while I question the authenticity of the story regarding a chef who didn't have time one day to wank into Winner's food, only to have it returned to the kitchen because Winner said it tasted wrong, I say that deserves to be true. But enough of what Britain's top culinary artistes have pulled off. What I hope to pull off today is the act of proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the 1978 version of The Big Sleep is the film that most accurately depicts the work of one of the greatest writers ever to put pen to paper in a haze of alcoholic self-loathing, Raymond Chandler.
All right, and thank you for ruining all restaurants for me. Prosecution, you may begin your first exhibit.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would first like to address the bad acting, which is largely a result of the poor casting decisions made for this feature. And let's start with the main character, Robert Mitchum, who is otherwise a great actor. Let's face it, he has the chops to be menacing, like Night of the Hunter or Cape Fear, or the ability to be a lackadaisical drunk joker, like in El Dorado. But trying to marry these two styles ultimately falls flat, and what we end up with is a cut-rate Roger Moore, judo chop and all. So Robert Mitchum basically kind of sleepwalks from scene to scene, and thankfully everyone explains everything to him in this movie, or he probably wouldn't even solve the first case. Never mind the second case that they keep nudging him into, like, hey, don't you want to figure out where Rusty is? And he's like, no, not really. And then they realize there was an hour of the movie left, so he's like, I better figure out what happened to Rusty.
In fairness, this is more Raymond Chandler's problem than Robert Mitchum's. And this was not Robert Mitchum's first time around the block playing Marlowe. He played him previously in the 1975 version of Farewell, My Lovely.
He did, and that version is not on trial, and this is, and we have to deal with Robert Mitchum's poor choices, which are probably a result of bad directing as well. But that's a whole nother point I want to get to. I want to go through the shortcomings of the other actors as well, including absolute icon, Jimmy Stewart. He is wasted in his small role as the general. He does not invoke the dignity the character requires. You feel sorry for Stewart for taking this role. You don't feel sorry for the general with the loose daughters. And I would also like to point out Oliver Reed's performance, which could be described as a slow boil, in so much as if you never turn on the oven, the water is boiling slowly.
Well, in fairness, Michael Winner did describe this film as the shootout at the Alcoholics Anonymous Corral. And there are more than a few celebrated drinkers on the cast of this. I'm sure we're going to get to Richard Boone anytime now.
Oh yeah, that's true. He broke his foot before they were even filming, and
yeah,
just like when I want to talk about Richard Boone, that goes to some of the bad editing choices and story development that we see in this particular version. This idea of introducing characters right at the end, and again, these characters aren't particularly well acted either. You have the little guy who comes in to basically fill in Robert Mitchum's character on everything that he's missed up till now. And then you have the brown man come in, played by Roger Boone, to be the heavy, just because Robert Mitchum needs to fight someone. He hasn't shot anyone, It's like he's like getting like itchy here. Like, so
well, the crazy thing about Chandler's novels, about Chandler's Philip Marlowe novels, is this is probably the only one that has something close to a gunfight in it. In most of the books, Marlowe either never draws his gun or or doesn't have one. In The Lady in the Lake, the fact that Marlowe doesn't have a gun is a big plot point in it. They are very much non-violent works. But you've correctly identified one of the problems in terms of the plot construction, which is purely down to Chandler, which is that the novel, like so many of his novels, which people tend to think are twisty-turny, labyrinthine affairs, is in fact just cobbled together from two existing short stories. And when I say short stories, I mean long short stories. One called The Curtain and one called Killer in the Rain. And so basically he kind of just sort of attaches the two together by the loosest possible threads. There really is no connection between the whole pornography plot and the rest of the plot involving the disappearance of Rusty Regan, save for the fact that the general's daughter is one of the people being photographed for pornography, and that Oliver Reed just happens to be the pornographer's landlord. The rest of it is pure coincidence.
No, it's true, and I'm happy to hear the defense is in violent agreement with me. Yes.
So is this book or is this film more accurate to the book in that, like in the first movie, Humphrey Bogart has like this little thing that flips out that has guns like at the ready in his car. And in this movie, like people are giving him guns because he's more clever than them.
Yeah, no, the line specifically, everybody keeps giving me guns today, does come from the novel. Yeah, it's an almost Bondian device, isn't it, in the Bogart movie, this thing that flips out a gun. Yeah. It's like those, like the machines where you can buy schoolgirls' wet panties in Japan.
Oh, wow. Moving on.
Which we've only read about.
Yes.
Ben doesn't know a thing about that.
No. I think there was one in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla.
So we're kind of
a giant panty machine.
Oh, jeez. Representing the ghost of everyone lost in World War II, of course. So this kind of buttresses into my next point that I wanted to bring up, which was largely about the editing and construction. And here I'll address a few things from the novel as well. So this movie, it has a lot of moving parts. I mean, a lot. There's a bevy of characters and lines of intrigue that get so convoluted that the only way they get disentangled is by introducing more characters and more lines of intrigue. He paints himself into a corner and then uses a sledgehammer against the wall to get out. And this is unfortunate because the director, Michael Winner, is better than this, and we saw it in arguably his best feature, Death Wish. Death Wish is a tight and punchy character piece that does not get bogged down. And the neo-noir genre, which this fits into, this was a band of movies that came out in the 70s trying to invoke and be redolent of those 40s and 30s aesthetics. They all basically suffered from being muddy. But The Big Sleep, in particular, comes from muddy source material, as noted film historians Jeff Mayer and Brian McDonald noted in their Encyclopedia of Film Noir, and I quote, "The plot of The Big Sleep is very convoluted and indeed so labyrinth in parts that even Chandler admitted to not being able to name the perpetrator of one of the murders." So that goes back to the point that we had talked about before. This is something that's recognized in Chandler's work. It's like, yeah, it's complicated. And we see this complication in similar outings from other neo-noir directors like René Clément and J. Lee Thompson. The neo-noir genre would just not work in the 70s, and it would largely be a failure until maybe the 90s and beyond, when you get into maybe this neo-noir point. And to step on something I know Robb was going to mention later, a movie like Brick, for example, which is much...
You know what our jurors are thinking?
Well, I was listening to his monologue earlier. And so the genre ultimately does work. It doesn't work in the 70s. The 70s was moving much more to a dyspeptic kind of tone with movies like, Soylent Green and The Parallax View, that more of that paranoid kind of look that you would think the noir genre would fit nicely into, but it ultimately just falls incredibly flat.
Harsh.
Very, very. Because I like Michael Winner. I like the ideas in the neo-noir genre, but if we're talking good movie, bad movie, they make for bad movies.
Yeah, if we're going to talk about Michael Winner's best movie, we should really discuss One Tom Tom, the Dog Who Saved Hollywood.
It's Death Wish.
and possibly even, I'll never forget What's His Name, which is one of about 3 movies to claim the accolade of being the first movie to use the F word.
What
the dog
focus on
movies?
this one. Do you have a rebuttal to the point of this plot being overly convoluted?
Yeah, it's Chandler. It is Chandler. That is the thing. What we have here is a director who wrote the screenplay. Winner wrote the screenplay, and he is not a good enough writer to do anything stylish or unique with the source material. Essentially, he just removed the he says and she says from all the dialogue and changed the word lieutenant to inspector. And while that element doesn't work, I argue that it somehow does for the obviously budget-driven decision to set the events of the story in 1970s Britain.
And that buttresses into my next point. If I didn't know better, Matthew, I'd say you were reading my notes.
All right. You were done, you son of a bitch.
No. Here we go. So, with all due apologies to our esteemed guest, Matthew, and our this show's proud tradition of distinguished British guests. This movie has no business being in England. I have to apologize. I mean, Britain got lucky with importing jazz via Kenny Ball, but importing noir did not work because this is it is a quintessentially an American genre, and the contrivances that are demanded to work in an English setting for this movie are just numerous, tedious, and with them we lose the grittiness, the atmosphere, and yes, they got rid of the dank.
Oh,
So-
the dank.
And
Not the dank.
So I know the dank, and so we
The
when
dank,
we watch
the dank.
Exactly. Aw, Muffle
So-
the dank.
I gotta get rid of the dank. All right, so these elements then that we see in this British version are more redolent of James Bond and not Bogart. We have the posh, rare book dealer, the noble Chevelle Club, and the stately manners. These all work against the noir tone, whereas in the original novel and the original movie that takes place in L.A., these types of clubs and establishments highlight the experience instead of muting it.
Okay.
Question from the bench for either who care to answer. Do we know why it was moved to Britain?
That was a question I was going to ask Matthew about, actually. I didn't know if you knew.
Well, it was just that they happened to have the rights to the first two Chandler novels. The first one had been filmed to some success in '75, and it just so happened that that Winner was able to turn out a quick screenplay, and he had a very precise set of rules in that he never filmed any movie on set. He would only ever film on location, and presumably he just simply felt that it was easier for him to remain in England. Particularly after he'd been burned so badly by the experience of One Ton Ton. I mean, we tend to associate it. It was quite a notorious flop at the time. Starred Shecky Green, I remember. And so I think he was probably preferring to stay closer to home at that point.
So Michael Winner was living in England at the time?
Well, Winner is English, but here's the important thing.
okay.
Right?
Okay.
As I say, he's an Englishman, a terrible person. It has been alleged by many people. As a matter of fact, only today I was out at the shops and I saw a book entitled "Surviving Michael Winner," written by his assistant for 30 years. Now, Robert Mitchum, when he came to England to make this movie, was first of all he was of the opinion that Michael Winner was an agent of Mossad. I have no idea why he thought that. He was also of the opinion that Winner had changed the screenplay to turn Marlowe into a homosexual. The reason being that he turns down an invitation of sex with Candy Clark during the movie. And he also believed that Winner had substantially altered the dialogue to make it more English. Winner, of course, had done nothing of the sort. Chandler, although he is famously an American author and an American icon, was raised and educated in Britain. The one surviving recording of Chandler, which I'm sure you can find on YouTube, is a fascinating conversation between himself and Ian Fleming at the time when Chandler had just finished what turned out to be his last novel, Playback, and Fleming was writing Goldfinger. Now, Fleming sounds exactly like you would imagine Ian Fleming would sound like. He's just downed a couple of scotches. He's just removed the cigar holder that he's borrowed from Burgess Meredith's Penguin from his mouth. But Chandler does not sound like Robert Mitchum. He doesn't sound like Humphrey Bogart. He has this extraordinarily effete, high-pitched, almost British voice. And so the weird thing is that when spoken out of English accents rather than American accents, it just doesn't sound that strange. Winner wasn't good enough to make the changes necessary to alter anything other than just location names.
And the movie ultimately suffers for it greatly, I would say, because when you're doing this noir genre, it's very important that you hit on a few key elements. And, like the femme fatale, you need the intrigue. And granted, some convoluted plot lines and red herrings are called for, but in its totality, none of them work together in this movie. It's anti-synergy. It has strong elements that don't work together. And, Your Honor, I think I'll rest my case there and turn over the remainder of the time to the defense.
Very well. Mr. Elliott, you have the floor, sir.
Okay, I'll just put down the burger I was having, and the mayo tastes wrong. Weird. Okay.
Oh no!
Oh, my
You didn't
God.
go to Michael Winter's restaurant, did you?
Your Honor, a film must be judged on its own merits. I do not believe the way to defend any movie is to criticize another. However, first of all, I am an appalling hypocrite. And secondly, given that both the 46 Big Sleep and the 78 Big Sleep draw on the same novel, the title of which temporarily eludes me, it is impossible not to draw certain comparisons. The 1946 version of The Big Sleep is an undisputed classic. It's directed by the legendary Howard Hawks, stars the equally legendary pairing of Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. What is not to love? It is a cinephile's dream. But as a faithful dramatization of Raymond Chandler's 1939 novel, it falls far short. For starters, no narration. That's one of the prerequisites of any private eye novel, and a huge missed opportunity to have Brady reciting Chandler's immortal prose. It's also surprisingly overlit, but I'll skip over that. Secondly, there's way too much of Bogart and Bacall. The character of Vivian Sternwood, or Vivian Rutledge as she becomes in the movie, is not in any sense the heroine of The Big Sleep, but her role is vastly inflated in the 46 movie to the extent that she's not only given as much screen time as possible, but for some reason even gets a musical number, which succeeds in doing nothing other than killing a couple of minutes. Her leading lady status serves only as a distraction from what the story is actually about. And that's the other important issue here. There is no way, with its subplot concerning a black market pornography business, that can be depicted on screen in the Hays Code era. In addition, the screenplay goes to some lengths to make the solution unnecessarily opaque. And finally, I would suggest, in distinct opposition to what my learning colleague has said, that with the exception of the two leads and Elisha Cook Jr. playing a 10-time loser, the rest of the cast are all eminently forgettable. And now, on to the 1978 Big Sleep, a film that should not succeed in any way whatsoever.
And doesn't.
I put it to you, members of the jury, that it does succeed, precisely because it is not made by a director talented enough to make a mess of it. Winner's direction is not stylish, sophisticated, or distinctive enough for him to give anything more than a thoroughly literal depiction of the novel, which somehow manages to convey that rough around the edges, fresh out of the pulp style of the book itself. Although the shot of Candy Clark stark naked and cross-legged in front of a dead pornographer is almost a piece of art and really deserves to be displayed in the Sistine.
Oh, God.
Hey, here, agreed.
Yeah, I mean, you probably don't know this, but for the 1970s in Britain, the porn subplot works perfectly. Britain in that era was awash with porn of a startlingly depressing quality. Hell, in 1974, the top grossing film at the UK box office was not The Man with the Golden Gun, but the grubby sex comedy Confessions of a Window Cleaner, a film that ushered in one of the most dispiriting eras in British cinema, as outlined in Simon Sheridan's indispensable book, Keeping the British End Up. And of course, there was at the time on TV the famous television series The Sweeney, which involved cops who almost always met their contacts, or snouts, as they were referred to in British television, in strip clubs, which meant that half the audience would be completely oblivious to what the plot was actually about. And also, the late Irish comedian Sean Hughes made a great point about, at the time of this TV series, The Sweeney, one of the most famous elements of it, which even made it into the trailers for the attempted reboot movie with Ray Winston about 10 years ago, was the line, "Get your trousers on, you're nicked," in which the cop, Jack Regan, would kick down the doors of some British criminal, would leap up out of bed, and in those few seconds, you would see the bare breasts of the naked woman next to him, because you could show things like that on British TV, even in the 70s. And Sean Hughes described the race to get to the comfortable chair in order to disguise his noticeable erection from his Catholic parents. And so it became a battle between himself and his brothers as to who would be there for the "get your trousers on, you're nicked" scene, which was law in every episode of The Sweeney. But we're not discussing The Sweeney. We are discussing the 1978 Big Sleep, and where the 1946 cast were memorable only in how forgettable they were, I suggest that Winner somehow assembled a distinctive set of actors who would inhabit the role of Chandler's creations no matter their nationality. Joan Collins as a duplicitous brunette? Yeah, I could just about get my head around that. Oliver Reed as a menacing, whispering criminal's kingpin? Of course. Colin Blakely, a man who looked as if he was always wearing a stocking mask over his features and was essentially the British Elisha Cook Jr. as the British Elisha Cook Jr. It sort of makes sense, I guess. Richard Boone, who we mentioned before, the brown man, Lash Canino, who looks so thoroughly psychotic that the fact that he has a cast on his foot, the result of a real-life injury, just doesn't seem all that strange in this setting. And, speaking of strange, perhaps the finest piece of casting in the whole movie, Candy Clark, David Bowie's co-star in The Man Who Fell to Earth, giving a performance so totally batshit that if a family of bats were to watch it, they would all immediately ask, did I do that? Insulation.
That performance was interesting, prosecution. And do you have anything to weigh in on 70s British pornography?
Well, actually, I have lots of things to say about 70s British pornography. I'm a bit of a... Wait, no, we'll cut that. No, look, the puritanical element of this, the porn being subversive, like the idea of a young Matthew J. Elliott seeing titties on British TV is all very interesting and all very compelling, and I'm sure it's something that the audience is going to think long and hard about.
It's certainly a fortune in therapist fees.
You said hard.
But when we get back to the movie, and that being a plot element, it obviously doesn't resonate particularly strongly today, but that's okay. We can understand why things are different in the past, and it ultimately doesn't really even go anywhere, and it is really just an excuse to see Candy Clark be naked. We get to see her naked a couple of times, and it's like, oh, okay, there you go. There's your nudity and everything. The audience deserves better than such a cheap. It deserves better than a cheap, hokey thrill like that. It's demeaning to the actress. It's demeaning to the audience. Like, we don't really need this for any of the other plot points to work. You can just say these are pornographic pictures. But instead they went through the trouble of making that porn book was actually a real prop they made with real models in it. I can't remember the names right now, but
one of the models was Robert Mitchum's mistress during the shooting of the movie.
Yes, that's right. I did read that, and it's just one of those things where it's like, this is probably the director just wanted to be a pervert and had a lot of money to do it.
It's in the story. It's in the original story, Killer in the Rain. It's in the novel The Big Sleep.
And you can do it subtly. You don't have to hit us over the head with actual pornographic images. They can be implied.
In the 46 version, you have Bogey walking into the room, and there is Carmen Sternwood just sat drugged. Seemingly drugged, because we weren't allowed to show drugs, just mumbling to herself, fully clothed, with no concept of what the hell's going on. Nobody even suggests that there is a porn business. So it's baffling, far more so, I think, than the relatively straightforward plotting of the 78 movie.
But we're not putting the old movie on trial. We're looking at 78 in a vacuum, and it could have stood. It could have stood to have more subtlety on the pornographic arena. That's something the jury's going to have to decide. And giving this cavalcade of perverts, I know how they're going to come down on that.
Damn right.
Well, one in particular. Mr. Elliott, do you have any other exhibits to bring forward?
I rest, Your Honor. I would just like to bring up the burger that I just ate. I mean, bring it up in a very, very real sense. But in all other respects, I rest.
Both sides have rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their closing arguments. Mr. Schlender, you may begin monologuizing now.
Depending on the editing, this is my fifth and final monologue. To make sense of the case, I have taken the liberty of introducing a brand new character at the end that spells everything out for me. Big Ben Haslar. Big Ben Haslar ran the Shukushu Saloon on 5th. He poured my third sake, and he told me that it turns out the case was really about Matthew getting revenge for his twin brother from episode 8 of Reels of Justice. That's right. This has been the twist the whole time, apparently, and everyone knew, but no one told me, but everyone assumed I knew. A little underwhelming, but here we are. So what did Ryan and Maynard have to do with it? Surprisingly little. And turns out, things just have to happen to keep things moving along. And as it turns out, Matthew was really not a bad guy at all. I joined him for fish and chips. I told him in America, chips are potato chips. He said in England, chips are made from potatoes as well. Hell of a thing.
That's great.
Shut up and keep drinking your sake there, Mr. Prosecutor. Mr. Elliott, you may present your closing argument.
Okay. It is no secret that Robin Mitchum's co-star in this movie, Sarah Miles, and I have some history. There's friction there. Back in 1990, when she was mostly famous for drinking her own piss. Yes, really, Google it.
Oh no.
She and Richard Harris were touring in a production of Pirandello's Henry IV. I, as is equally well known, was an usher at the Palace Theatre in Manchester. And as I walked down the passageway that led to the stage door one day, she drove down it, opened her car door, which nearly hit me. Now, this led to what is undoubtedly one of the most celebrated celebrity feuds in show business history. But in the interests of getting this podcast done, Sarah, I'm prepared to put an end to this beef. History will record that in the end, I was the better man. And in closing, I would like to say, for the 1946 Big Sleep is a cinematic classic that is not Chandler, but the 1978 Big Sleep is not a cinematic classic, but it somehow is Chandler. And Candy Clark is naked about 170% of the time. Thank you.
He knows his
These are the
audience
facts.
really well.
Cavalcade of perverts.
Thank you both. Members of the
That was
jury.
supposed to be Barclay's last movie, wasn't it? Cavalcade of Perverts.
I think it was.
Cavalcade of perverts, Mr. Robb Maynard, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, and Mr. Ryan Gonna Rub You Out Luis Rodriguez. You have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict. Watching this movie was the best sleep I ever had.
All right, so what are we thinking, Rob? You haven't said anything so far, so why don't you go first?
Well, we just started, so I don't know when I was.
I haven't
supposed to say
said
something
anything
before
either. That
this.
judge just has the same name.
Yeah, exactly. Geez. What do I think? I was generally baffled during a lot of this movie. The plot is really convoluted, but as the defense pointed out, the book plot is convoluted. So I don't know how you adapt a convoluted book without getting a convoluted movie.
So
Does
you've
that
read
make
the
it
book?
bad?
I own the book, which is like a step closer to reading the book than a lot of people.
I'm Rob. I own a lot of books.
Popping up my sofa right now, right?
I don't own a lot of books. I own that book and most of the Peanuts collection. That's about all the books I have.
I have the
Oh, I
Calvin
have
Hobbes
Peanuts
one.
envy. I know I shouldn't be in this room. I was looking for the men's room. I got all turned around. Sorry,
because
I'm
that
done.
was a good joke.
That was a good one. That was a good one. Gosh. Anyway, immediately after watching this movie, I went back and watched the 46 version.
Me too.
And I think Ben, you did too as well.
I did, yeah. All three of us
And
did.
it actually made me like the 78 more, like a little bit more than I did, because I was like, oh, this is a really convoluted plot that I just kind of forgot the first time I watched this movie. Just piece by piece. Mitchum is not Humphrey Bogart, but he's not trying to be. He's just, I think the prosecution said he was sleepwalking through the thing. I think he's just kind of Mitchum cool. Like he's just kind of never worried and never frazzled.
Well, to be fair, the title is The Big Sleep, so he's allowed, right?
Yeah.
It was
exactly.
originally titled The Big Sleepy, but then they took away the Y.
And originally it was titled Don't Wake Daddy before that. So yeah, Mitchum I thought was a fine protagonist. I thought Candy Clark was insane. As much as I appreciated her nudity and how good she looked in it, she was so over the top crazy that she's killed somebody, kind of like from the jump. You're like, she's killed somebody, it.
Yeah.
Well, also, she I don't know if she was trying to play somebody who was impaired, but that's kind of how it came off a couple times. And I don't want to be like undelicate, but
No, but you mean drugged out though, right?
no, I mean just like not all
Schizophrenic?
there. just
Well, you know, when people act like they're crazy, like you can tell like they're acting. In this movie, she really seemed like there's something off about her.
It's not it doesn't feel like a performance. It feels like they took somebody off the street and was like, "Hey, you look good naked. Come in this movie." And
she did,
they were
though.
just
Good for
Story
her.
of my life.
She worked hard on it. But a lot of the characters, I mean, I would say I can't say that they're, to me, more distinct. Even if we talk about the 46, with the exception of Canino. The brown man Canino has a ton more personality in the 78 than he does as just the sort of stiff tough that he was earlier. But besides that, and also maybe the wife that disappeared, she has a lot more personality too. But otherwise, a lot of the other characters are more forgettable. Elijah Cook Jr. obviously beats the hell out of whatever the British Elijah Cook Jr. was.
Is that the squirrely guy?
Yeah.
Who picks him up off the ground and
yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Elijah Cook Jr. From House on Haunted Hill. He's been like the best part of the Maltese Falcon.
yes.
Yeah. I watched Maltese Falcon right after this too. So I guess looking at it on a whole, it doesn't feel that noir-y to me. Like I understand the prosecution kept calling it a noir. Certainly the 46 one is, but I don't see noir in this. I see detective story, but I don't see the same kind of like light play with shadow. I don't see the language is not the same, right? Chandler's so funny and snappy. Bogart delivers it perfect. Mitchum just kind of chews those words out. Right? What did you think, Ben? Ryan.
Ryan. It's interesting that we ended up talking a lot about British television in this episode because that's what it felt like to me. It felt very much like either a TV movie or a pilot for a series.
I feel that on TV movie. Absolutely. I feel that. Ben?
I didn't know a lot about this going in. I was kind of blind to it. So like, as far as it being set in England, you know, I bought it because this is what was being fed to me as far as, everything else. The plot was very confusing to me. It sort of came together at the end where it's like, okay, I guess he just stumbled into this other mystery while solving this first one, I guess. I don't get why this guy's like so nonchalant about murder. You know, like people die and it's like, you're a detective. Like your whole thing is about justice for people dying wrongly. And he's like, okay, someone just got shot. I'll leave this scene. No big. I won't call the police or anything. And even at the end, he's like saying, you know, death is just like this big sleep. It's no big deal. And I just can't help but think this guy is like, he should have been a mortician rather than a detective, you know?
Or a taxidermist.
Yeah, or something. Like he didn't feel like a detective to me. Other than that, though, like Candy, that crazy lady, she was great. The other
Candy
sister
Clark
was also great. I do feel that this film, like the defense pointed out, it's the ensemble feels a lot more there to me than in the Bogart version, because really it's just, you know, 2 or 3 people that stand up there. Here, everybody sort of has a moment. So I don't know that it pushes it all the way to bad, but it's certainly worse than the Bogart version. If you're going to watch Big Sleep, watch that one.
And I don't know that there's a scene in 78 that has kind of like the cinematic feeling of any one scene between Bacall and Bogart in the original.
I agree, and there always is that magical chemistry between Bacall and Bogart, right? I mean, and the defense admitted, like, no, this is not better than the 46 one, because the 46 one is so great. But I think there is a lot of merit to this. One, I love Robert Mitchum anyway, so like I could probably watch him reading the phone book, and I'd be entertained. And Jimmy Stewart is tragically wasted, though. I understand he's old, but I don't even understand the point of why he's here. He's in the movie for maybe 3 minutes total.
His counterpart was too in the other movie, though, right?
Yes, even less. His counterpart's in it even less. It's just
like one scene as opposed to 2.
Yeah, basically. But I'll go on record. I can't say that it's a bad movie. So I'm going to go with not guilty, because the story does actually keep you enraptured, maybe because you're going, what the fuck's going on almost the whole time, but
in spite of itself, yes, you're interested.
It keeps you glued. You're like, what's gonna happen next? What's going on? Pretty much the whole time. And the clandestine pornography shop is just very funny, especially the one guy he kind of mildly chases and runs away. So it's definitely worth watching, and I could say I'd probably watch it again. But yeah, it scratches a different itch than the 46 one does. But yeah, maybe it is more accurate to Chandler. I don't know that I necessarily count that as being, better. If you're going to adapt something and you can adapt it better, then adapt it better. But still, I don't think this one is guilty. I'm going to go not guilty.
What are you thinking, Ben?
It's a wobbly film. You set it up there. It's trying to balance. It's going left. It's going right. But in the end, I sort of agree with not guilty. It is interesting in spite of itself. You are following it in spite of itself. And there are good performances that do keep you engaged. So begrudgingly, I go not guilty.
All right. Well, seeing as how either way it doesn't matter at this point, I think the prosecution put up a hell of a fight, so I'm going to vote guilty.
He hates those pity votes. Don't give him the pity vote.
Actually, I really liked my case, so thank you, Ryan.
All right, good. So we've got our verdict. Does anyone want to
Mr.
say,
Foreman.
let's go tell the judge before maybe Ryan would like to say that?
All right, let's go talk to that judge.
He's handsome, by the way. Very handsome.
He's handsome, by the way.
We need a better cue card, man.
We do.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict? I'm handsome.
We have your handsome honor. In the case of The People versus The Big Sleep, 1978, we find the defendant not guilty of being a bad movie.
The verdict is so rendered. The film shall not be put to death, which is good, as dead films are heavier than broken hearts. Court is adjourned.
All right. I got to think of who to possibly interview as.
Do like some kind of like mobster.
The nose or something.
We literally always do mobsters. So let me. Okay.
Italians. We don't do lobsters. We do Italians.
We do a lot of Italians. So very offensive. I know. All right. This is Phil M. Noir reporting to you live from outside the Reels of Justice. Mr. Schlender, would you care to share your thoughts on the jury's verdict?
I definitely understand where the jury's coming from, Mr. Noir. I think we walk a tightrope when we're talking about adaptations. In this case, it's an adaptation of a novel, an adaptation of another movie. Lots of moving pieces here. My colleague Matthew Elliott put up a very fun case, so at the end of the day, I do feel justice is served. I think this movie got a fair hearing, and there's enough that between me and Matt that we put out there for people to make their own decision when they watch it. So thank you, everyone.
We thank you. And here comes Mr. J. Elliott. Excuse me, could we get a word on how you feel about today's verdict and the fact that you won the Battle of the Middle Initiative?
I came here to seek justice for my twin brother over the matter of Reels of Justice versus the Avengers. And I feel that finally, in spite of frankly a devastatingly brilliant assault on every aspect of the 1978 Big Sleep, that I have finally been vindicated. And for that, I thank you all.
And we thank you. That's all we have from the courthouse today. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis.
That one was a lot of fun. Matthew, that was great. I just want to tell you, too, I actually am a big fan of these neo-noir kind of movies, like from the 70s. So when I was watching this, I'm like, this is right in my wheelhouse. I might say it's so bad it's good, though, which on this show still means bad. So I knew I had a case. But it was very enjoyable. I'm glad you put this on my radar. I'll be watching it again.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad that you are. I really cannot disagree with a single point that you make, except possibly how good of a director Michael Winner is. But there we go.
Hey, Death Wish is good. Okay.
Yeah.
Did he do the first Death Wish? I thought he did.
When we say Death Wish, we're not talking about the Bruce Willis version here.
No. So Michael Winner did Death Wish 1, 2, and 3. Yes.
I thought he just did 2 and 3. I didn't know he did 1.
No, he did the first one as well. Yeah.
I just thought he did 1 and 2. Actually, no, he did do 3. But 3 set in New York, but it's shot in England.
Is that the Crackdown, or is that
That's
4?
4.
That's 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
And 5 is So Very Tired.
I wish I was dead.
No, okay, wait.
5
This is
Star
true.
Trek.
In
So
Death
Very
Wish
Tired.
5, Charles Bronson rigs a soccer ball with an RC motor and C4 and drives the soccer ball up to the bad guy. The bad guy picks up and he blows it up. So you need to see that movie.
I don't play sports, by the way.
I think Bob Odenkirk does something very similar in Nobody. So, it's nice to see that the tradition is being continued.
That is fantastic. I got to watch that one then.
Yeah, I haven't seen
It's a hell of a movie.
Awesome.
I would just like to mention that the guy who Robert Mitchum barely chases out of the bookstore is an actor by the name of Derek Deadman, who also appears in the very first Harry Potter film. He's the guy who is the landlord of the Wizard's pub that Hagrid takes Harry to on Diagon Alley.
And ironically, he's still alive.
Also running away with pornography.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yeah, to pornography very, very tall women.
And he didn't even know they were making a movie. So Matthew, what's been keeping you busy lately? What have you been up to?
Right. Well, so many things, and of course, mostly I'm known for the Rifftrax. We got a new Rifftrax out yesterday, which is 3 episodes of the 1950s Flash Gordon television series, which was shot in West Germany with an actor called Steve Holland. And man, they are bad. They are so bad. It's Ed Wood would look at this and go, "What the?" So they're an absolute gift. They absolutely are.
As of this recording, you just wrote for the riff for Wonder Woman 1984, which I meant to tell you was awesome.
Yeah, I actually think I did probably some of my best work on that one, and I'm not even in it. But yeah, I was very happy with that. It worked really well. I got to do the whole sequence of the truck chase. And
nice.
but props to Mary Jo and Bridget Nelson for their delivery. And I did break out laughing at the part where they rescue the kids, where she rescues the kids who are playing football in the street and grabs them as she swings past, and one of the kids goes, "I believe there was also a ball."
Collectively, you all made the last 143 minutes of that worth watching. So thank you.
No, that was very cool stuff, and I know we did Wonder Woman 1984 as well. We put in on trial, and it was found guilty.
So, very justifiably so.
Wow, that's a hot take.
Yeah, it's very much the Superman 2 to Wonder Woman's Superman 1.
Yes, yes,
like
it absolutely is. Oh, come on, Superman 2 sucks. We all know it.
Whoa! What about the guy with the roller skates and the umbrella? I mean, come on.
I think you're thinking of Superman 3.
I was going to say Superman 3,
Superman 2.
Okay. Like, you want to talk about Superman 3. If you wanted to say 84 was the Superman 3 to Superman 2, then I might understand it.
Superman 2 is compromised, and it sucks.
Oh, God. We're getting into the weeds here, folks.
Yeah, exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let's start over.
Round 2.
Very cool. Anything else you're working on you want to talk about, Matthew?
Yeah, what I really wanted to talk about is a thing that is really my 9 to 5, my 5 days a week job, which was as the scriptwriter in chief for Imagination Theatre, which is a radio drama organization out of Seattle in the United States. I'm their head writer. I've written around about 350 radio scripts over the last about 19 years, and many of them for Imagination Theatre. They have a number of sort of revolving series. One of them is a soft-boiled 1950s detective series called The Adventures of Harry Nile, which features the theme tune from the 1975 version of Farewell, My Lovely, starring Robert Mitchum as Philip Marlowe. We also have the further adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I'm proud to say I'm the only writer ever to have adapted all 60 of Conan Doyle's original Holmes stories. And more recently, we have a comedy crime series called Murder in the Murdochs, which is basically kind of like a Howard Hawksian type comedy lots of fast banter back and forth. And I'm very proud to say stars an actual member of TV royalty, Cynthia Lauren Tweez, better known as Julie, your cruise director from The Love Boat.
Oh, nice.
Cool. And not to promote my own material, but you were on my podcast earlier this year, and you were fantastic.
Oh, I was going to surprise you by recommending that. I have it pulled up on my phone and everything. It's it's episode 87.
Yes, of the Coolness Chronicles, starring Matthew J. Elliott. It was fantastic.
87 after the 87th precinct in honor of the late Ed McBain.
Of course, yes, definitely.
Naturally.
Yeah, that was intentional. Yes.
Yeah.
No, very cool. And maybe you'll do an adaptation of The Big Sleep sometime soon.
Oh, you should.
I would love to do, and in fact, put to a radio producer a few months ago that I wanted to adapt all of the short stories that go up to make the Chandler novels, because they're the ones that never get adapted. But I think it's long past the point where we get a consistent series of Marlowe movies. Probably the most accurate performance of Marlowe was James Garner in the 1969 movie Marlowe, based on the novel The Little Sister. Because Chandler said bizarrely that he thought the actor who was best suited to play Marlowe was Cary Grant.
Really?
Yeah, and the most Cary Grant-ish American actor that you can probably think of would be James Garner.
Yeah, right.
A very similar, gives the sort of performance that you would expect, and even smokes a pipe, which Marlowe was a pipe smoker in the novels, and this is the only time he's seen smoking a pipe in the movies. I would suggest that today John Hamm would make a terrific Marlowe, but I believe he's off making Fletch.
Another Fletch? No.
Yeah,
Fletch lives again.
Live some more.
It's based on the second novel, Confess Fletch. I've read a lot of the Fletch novels. I tried to read that one, and I gave up about halfway through at the point where he gets raped by his mother-in-law.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh. A good point to cut out, yeah. Good point to change the subject, in fact.
Yeah.
Matthew, we always ask for recommendations from our guests for movies that you think our listeners should check out. So what is a movie that they should check out?
Right. Well, there are about 50 movies that I could probably recommend that I'm sure your listeners have never heard of. But I thought I would stay on theme here with another Michael Winner movie, one of the last that he directed, the 1988 version of Agatha Christie's Appointment with Death, starring Peter Ustinov as Hercule Poirot for the very last time in his career. Now, there had been a series of very substantially larger budget productions, and this was very much not one of those. It kind of puts me in mind in terms of the cinematography of those Harry Allen Towers Fu Manchu movies, in that everything is filmed in one corner of a room because we can't move to the left or right for any great direction for fear of you seeing the modern electric light fixtures. But it is surprisingly a faithful adaptation. What's even more bizarre is the fact that when they did the story for television, starring David Suchet, who is very much the ideal Hercule Poirot, they screwed around with the novel for no good reason, to the extent that it's not even recognizable. This one is recognizable. It's got a screenplay by Anthony Shaffer. It's set in the Holy Land. Has a nicely, I wouldn't say starry cast, but a celebrity cast. You have Carrie Fisher and David Soul, and also John Gielgud and Lauren Bacall reuniting for the first time since Murder on the Orient Express in 1974. And in the manner of The Big Sleep, in terms of things that shouldn't work but do, it has a very jazzy theme tune, which you think will be entirely at odds with the subject matter, but actually is quite nice.
Huh. Oh, no.
Fantastic.
Check that out. We
Maynard,
love our
get that
movies.
all that entire quote has to be for the recommendation, though. All of it. So
Twitter has a character limit for a
You
reason.
can fit it in there on Instagram. Definitely.
You could definitely fit it there on Instagram. Let's go to our judge, Big Ben. What's your recommendation?
The best noir detective film ever made, of course, features killer replicants from the future. I'm going with Blade Runner. And if you really want that private dick feeling that movies like The Big Sleep have, check out the theatrical cut.
Private dick feeling.
You didn't
I love it.
private feeling
sorry.
would come out.
no.
Oh, that's great.
Please
Matthew L.J. Elliott's in my brain. I can't get him out now.
You turned us all into Beavis and Butthead.
Anyway, check out the theatrical cut where Ford does voiceovers in narration. But any edition is well worth your time. It raises great questions about life. Where does it begin? Where does it end? What's real? What's not real? It paints a cyberpunk world that I just want to dive in and visit. It's superb. Check it out.
Cool. I also like the theatrical cut, although a lot of people don't. But the voiceovers really sell the whole detective angle. Ryan, why don't you go next?
Since this week is about a remake from 1978, my recommendation is a film that shares its title with another remake released that same year, Ernst Lubitsch's Heaven Can Wait from 1943. With beautiful Technicolor cinematography from the legendary Edward Kronjaeger and sparkling urbane dialogue and performances delivered in a distinctly Lubitchian fashion.
Whoa!
It's like a good movie or whatever. Case dismissed. Heaven Can Wait is for rent on all VOD platforms and on sale from Criterion.
Oh, that film definitely does sound Lubitchian, man. Really.
I loved his resting Lubitsch face.
Exactly. He got the joke before I did. Schlenzo, what's your recommendation?
Well, first of all, I just got to say, everyone, I'm really impressed with how on point and relevant our recommendations have been. And in my quest to recommend every Charles Bronson movie on this show, I present Rider on the Rain from 1970, directed by the aforementioned René Clément. This has some thematic relationships to the 78 version of The Big Sleep. Namely, an American, played by Bronson, is investigating the murder of a sex maniac in France for reasons that are mysterious or wholly convoluted. Again, in neo-noir, it's not about what or why something is happening, just that something is happening at all.
And that there's shadows. Oh, great.
Exactly.
You know,
no, but actually, Matt, if you did if you like The Big Sleep, you should check out Rider on the Rain, though. It's
It sounds awesome.
Yeah. It's on Amazon Prime. I know things are different in Britain, so it might be on something different, but it's on Prime for free right now.
Okay, right. I'll check that out. Thank you for the recommendation.
You got it.
I believe it's Amazon Prestige in
Yes.
the UK. So for my recommendation, I'm going to try to take us in a different direction. I am going to go with another remake, one that may actually surpass the original, depending on who you ask, and that is David Cronenberg's 1986 body horror, The Fly. This film is a fusion of two undeniably wonderful elements, that being Jeff Goldblum and teleportation pseudoscience, which I remind you all is a kind of science. And,
this is true.
And the unspeakable dickless abomination thus produced will likely haunt you for days afterwards.
Gina Davis?
I dare you to try to eat while watching this movie. It happens to be streaming right now on Fubo, whatever the fuck that is. All hail Brundlefly.
That was my last Scrabble hand.
Nobody badmouth Gina Davis. She was in The Long Kiss Goodnight, the greatest action movie in the English language.
You know, I felt terrible for saying it because I do love Gina Davis. She's amazing. So it was right there. I'm not made of stone.
No, pretty great. And I know Ryan loves his Long Kiss Goodnight. I don't mean the movie either.
It's that private dick feeling. What can I say?
Yeah, and in The Long Kiss Goodnight, there's actually a scene where Samuel L. Jackson is watching Elliott Gould on TV as Philip Marlowe in The Long Goodbye.
Oh gosh, look at that. That's some Inception stuff right there.
Yeah.
It's all related, baby.
And with that, we are all out of show for the week, but we want to thank our guest, Matthew J. Elliott, for joining us. Thank you, Matthew.
It's been an honor with you.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Very spit spot and all that. And we hope everyone will join us again real soon as the reels of justice keep turning.
Count it.
Bye-bye.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.